On the evening of May 26, 1995, 22-year-old Tracy Brazel went out with two friends for a night of fun at Kodiak Ron's pub in Everett, Washington. After her friends left following some drinks, Tracy decided to stay at the arcade to complete her game. That was the last time anyone heard from her. Despite extensive efforts by her family to locate her, no trace of Tracy was ever found. 2 months later, 26-year-old Patricia Patty Berry went missing under similar circumstances and in the same area. 8 days later, her lifeless body was found in the woods, leaving her family devastated. What could have happened to Tracy Brazel and Patricia Berry? Were both events connected? Hi, and welcome back to Mysterious Hook Friends. Today, we are looking at the disturbing case of Patty Berry and Tracy Brazel. Everett is the largest city in Snohomish County, Washington, with a population of over 110,000 people. It is a place known for saltwater beaches, rolling hills, and river deltas, making it a beautiful spot to unwind in nature. Unfortunately for two young women and their families, this lovely town was the backdrop to tragedy and years of grief. Tracy Brazel was born on January 29, 1973 to Bill and Peggy Brazel in Glenridge, New Jersey. Tracy had an older sister, Lisa, whom she loved and emulated a lot as a child. Tracy had a contagious smile, enjoyed reading books, and was eager to learn from a very early age. In 1986, when Tracy was 13 years old, her parents Bill and Peggy started having issues that led to their divorce. Peggy got custody of the girls and decided to move closer to her family in Snohomish County, Washington. They relocated when Tracy and Lisa were 16-19 years old, respectively. Bill loved his children and kept in touch with them at Snohomish, despite being separated from his wife and living in New Jersey. Tracy and Lisa continued their education in Snohomish County. Tracy wanted to go to cosmetology school, and even though she was still in her junior year, she worked hard to earn credits. At cosmetology school, Tracy's bright personality made her popular with her classmates, but her best friend was Alana, popularly called Lonnie. Once school was over, Tracy got a job at Great Cliff's hair salon at Mill Creek. At the time, she was already in her early 20s and living independently at Keeler's Corner Apartments in Linwood. Even though Tracy had moved out, she kept in touch with her mother and sister. She would call her mother every day and also called her sister frequently. She maintained her close relationship with Alana, often going out to lunch together. In May 1995, Tracy sent a letter to her family, revealing that she wanted to change certain things about her life. She also enclosed a picture of herself wearing a business suit. Soon after Lisa and Peggy got Tracy's letter, her father Bill visited from New Jersey to check on her. Bill observed that Tracy had chosen to dye her hair platinum blonde. He also learned she was encountering difficulties with a coworker at a workplace. Tracy was growing increasingly discontent with the very place she once envisioned as her dream job, and these sudden changes in his daughter's behavior left Bill feeling unsettled. Peggy did not notice anything unusual at the time. She was busy preparing for an overseas vacation with her mother on May 25, 1995, before going to the airport for their trip. Tracy's mother and grandmother stopped by her workplace to see her. A day later, on May 26, 1995, Tracy quit her job unexpectedly. Although the reasons were unclear, Tracy seemed happy about quitting her job and decided to celebrate at night with some friends. Her best friend Alana was out of the country at the time, but Tracy had made plans to meet her when she returned. She went out for drinks with her friends, Dina and David Conlon, who were siblings. They ended the night at Kodiak Ron's pub along Highway 99, where Tracy immersed herself in arcade games. As the clock inched past 1 a.m., Tracy told David and Dina not to wait for her as she wanted to finish her game. Her friends said their goodbyes and left shortly. It wasn't until 1:45 a.m. that Tracy finally left the pub alone. On May 30th, 1995, Alana got back from her trip and started calling Tracy to meet up for their planned lunch, but all her calls went unanswered. She left messages but could not get through to Tracy. Feeling anxious, Alana decided to go to Tracy's apartment to check on her. The front door was locked, and despite repeated knocking, Alana got no response. She eventually gave up and was about to leave when she noticed something that got her more bothered. It was Tracy's car, A white Ford Probe parked peculiarly on the side of the street instead of its usual spot inside of the apartment complex. Alana moved closer to the car only to make another disturbing discovery. The passenger side window was broken, but there was no glass pieces or shards inside the car. Immediately, Alana called Tracy's mother, Peggy, but her line was not reachable when she was vacationing overseas. Alana called another family member about her worries, and together they visited the apartment and checked out Tracy's car. But without any sign of foul play, they assumed Tracy would be back soon and would get in touch when she saw Alana's messages. No one reported Tracy missing because her mother, who normally spoke to her every day, was out of the country and unreachable. And her co-workers at the hair salon were not expecting her since she quit her job. On June 4th, 1995, Peggy's cruise ship docked in Montreal, and her phone was working again. When she called home, Peggy got the devastating news that her youngest daughter was missing. She dashed home in a panic and with Lisa's help filed a missing persons report. By then, 8 days had already passed since Tracy was last seen at the pub. The Snohomish Police Department swung into action looking for Tracy. They went to Linwood to examine her apartment and her parked Ford. The police checked for fingerprints inside the car, but found nothing, not even Tracy's prints. It seemed as if someone had wiped the car clean. Not even the shattered glass from the window was found, except for a few tiny fragments on the back seat. The investigators could not get any useful leads, and the police department at the time also lacked funding to do anything significant with the bits of evidence collected from the car. The investigation was at a dead end, but Peggy could not sit back and wait for the police department to be funded. She contacted her friend, Andy, a former police officer. He worked with the police officers in charge of the case and helped them analyze some of the evidence. Eventually, one solid piece of evidence emerged: a single drop of blood found on Tracy's car window. Unfortunately, there was no technology advanced enough to test the blood at the time. Once again, they had hit a dead end. And while the search for Tracy was going on, another young woman in the city went missing. Patricia Berry, popularly known as Patty, was born on February 10, 1969. Although no details about her childhood are known, Patty was a single mother working to support her 2-year-old daughter Jessica when she disappeared. In 1995, Patty took up work at a dancer at Honey's nightclub located along Highway 99. She didn't really like her job because she didn't think it was decent enough, but the pay was good, and she needed money to complete her education and provide for Jessica. Patty told her mother, Nancy Strensrue, that once she was done with school, she would get a proper job she could be proud of. With her job as a nighttime dancer, Patty would leave her toddler with a babysitter in the evening and fetch her after she got off work in the morning. But on July 31st, 1995, Patty did not show up at the babysitter's house. The babysitter called Nancy, Patty's mother, who immediately felt worried. Everyone knew how important Jessica was to Patty, and it was unthinkable that Patty had simply forgotten to pick up her daughter. They contacted every hospital in the area and the county morgue to see if anyone matching Patty's description had been brought in. Nancy finally called the police and reported Patty as missing. Instead of waiting for the police to take action, the whole family went out in search of Patty. The police sensed the urgency and immediately put out an all-points bulletin without waiting for 48 hours to pass. The investigators found that Patty had gotten off work around 1:30 a.m. on July 31st, 1995. The bouncer on the shift that night at Honey's told investigators that he had walked Patty to her car and noticed she had a flat tire. Someone procured a fix a flat inflator, but it only got the faulty tire half inflated. Still, it was enough to carry her to the nearest gas station where she could fix the tire. With that information, the investigators traced the route they thought Patty would have taken and found a gas station. But a note taped on the air machine at the gas station said the machine was inoperable. This meant that Patty would have been unable to fill her tire there. While the investigators were out interviewing the people at the nightclub, Patty's family was also searching for her, and they would be the ones to stumble on the next important lead. They found Patty's missing car close to a car wash behind a convenience store in South Everett, parked away from sight. They did not touch the car for fear of ruining evidence, but upon peeking inside, they saw a disturbing sight and immediately called the police. The car's interiors were covered in a massive amount of blood. This was no longer a missing persons case, but something much worse. When the police examined the scene, they concluded that someone wanted to conceal Patty's car from sight. They also noticed that the car wash offered air filling facilities, so Patty might have stopped there to fix the tire the night she disappeared. There were drops of blood on the exterior of the car, indicating that Patty was probably attacked when she was trying to fix her flat tire. The massive amount of blood in the interior meant that the attack had continued inside the car. The police searched the surrounding area and found items that belonged to Patty. With a sinking feeling, investigators understood that something bad had happened to Patty. On August 8, 1995, 8 days after Patty had gone missing, 2 kids playing in the wooded area just south of Everett Mall saw something so gruesome, they went shrieking and running to the adults. Police arrived to find the lifeless body of Patty Berry, nude from the waist down and bearing 18 stab wounds. Although Patty's family feared she was attacked, the news of her death confirmed their worst fear. According to the autopsy, Patty's killer possibly intended to molest her, and due to the location where her body was found, investigators believed that the killer was someone familiar with the area. The investigators went back to Honey's to retrieve surveillance footage from the night Patty left the club. Unfortunately, the footage was blank from beginning to end, which made the club owners look suspicious. It seemed the club owners were trying to hide something, but as much as the investigators wanted to handcuff them, there was no evidence tying them to the crime scene. Soon after, investigators got a call from a patron, Leslie James, who claimed he had information on Patty. James said he was at Honey's from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. and had spent about 20 minutes chatting with Patty. After leaving Honey's, he drove to a casino 20 miles away, and on his way back later that night, he claimed he saw Patty trying to inflate her tire at a gas station. This was the same gas station with the malfunctioning pump. The police believed James' story at first because they assumed that Patty had indeed visited the gas station. But James kept changing his story every time the police talked to him, making confusing and suspicious statements. The police put him on top of the suspect list and interrogated him thoroughly. However, there was no evidence to link James to the murder, so the police let him go. As the investigation stalled and police struggled to find a way forward, Nancy forged her own path. She contacted Scott North, a reporter for the Daily Herald, to keep Patty's story alive in the press. Scott published touching articles about Patty that eventually generated a good lead. A new witness connected the police about something he had seen the night Patty disappeared. The witness recounted seeing a man washing off bloodstains at the car wash where Patty's car had been found. He said he remembered the date vividly. It was his sister's birthday, but he never reported the incident, assuming it was animal blood on the car. The witness was asked to describe the man he saw at the car wash, and a composite sketch of the suspect was created. The police released the sketch to the public with hopes for a breakthrough, but no one came forward to identify the man. The case soon went cold after this, much to the disappointment of Patty's family. Months turned into years, and almost a decade later, in February 2005, the case was reopened by Snohomish County cold case detectives Jim Scharf and David Heitzman. By that time, forensic technology had advanced enough to make something out of the evidence gathered in Patty's car. Investigators believe that the suspect attacked Patty at the car wash. They decided to focus on the steering wheel and sent it to the Washington State Crime Lab for analysis. Most of the DNA on the wheel was Patty's, but one ray of hope shone through. Also present on the steering wheel was the DNA of an unidentified male. The newly extracted DNA profile was submitted to the Combined DNA Index System, and in 2008 it provided the long-awaited answer. Investigators zeroed in on a match with a known offender who was already in custody, serving time. A repeat offender named Danny Giles. 40-year-old Danny Giles had a long list of offenses on police record, but his DNA was only recently submitted to COITUS after a conviction for indecent exposure. He was a registered molester who was convicted of attempted abuse. His entire adult life had been spent going in and out of prison, starting with an abuse conviction in 1987. Throughout Giles' time in jail, he refused to be managed by psychologists and never participated in any treatment. He was described as psychopathic and posed a threat to women. According to Giles' ex-fiancée, he derived pleasure in threatening her with a knife. One of Giles' cellmates revealed that Giles admired the serial killer Gary Ridgway, popularly known by the moniker Green River Killer, for the number of lives he had claimed. But even the DNA evidence in Giles' criminal history were insufficient to charge him for Patty's murder. The DNA evidence only confirmed that Giles had been present in Patty's car, not that he had taken her life. The investigators started to piece the puzzle together and build a case against Giles. They compared the composite sketch of the suspect to Giles' picture and were astonished by the stark resemblance. They dug through records and discovered that Giles lived in the area where Patty's body had been dumped and was working for a local landscaping company at the time she was killed. But even with all this, they needed Giles to either confess to the crime or deny he was in Patty's car. Detective Jim Scharf researched Giles before meeting with him at the prison. He approached him as if seeking his help on Patty Barry's case, since Giles had lived and worked in the area. Giles said he had heard about Patty's death on TV, but didn't know anything else. He also denied ever being inside Patty's car and said he was unfamiliar with the area where the body was found. It was clear that Giles was telling lies. Detective Scharf knew that Giles would routinely visit the woods near Everett Mall to dump grass clippings from his landscaping workplace, the same woods where Patty's body had been found. To make Giles confess, Scharf showed him the DNA evidence that proved he was present in Patty's car. Despite being concerned, Giles staunchly refused to confess to the murder. But the detectives now had enough evidence to charge Giles with Patty's murder, so they did not waste time trying to get a confession. Since reopening Patty's cold case, the investigators had suspected that Tracy's disappearance and Patty's murder were linked. Both were young women who disappeared just months apart along Highway 99 late at night. In both cases, their car had been found abandoned with clear signs that someone had attempted to clean away all traces and fingerprints. While Tracy's body was never found, investigators were certain she too had lost her life to Giles. The investigators again took advantage of advanced forensic technology to crack Tracy's case. They sent a single drop of blood found on Tracy's car window for analysis and were able to extract DNA from it. This DNA also matched Giles' blood, proving that he had been present in Tracy's car as well. However, just as in Patty's case, Giles refused to confess or share any details about what happened to Tracy, but the detectives went ahead and charged him for Tracy's murder. On November 14, 2012, Giles was charged with the murder of Patty Barry and put to trial in Snohomish County Superior Court. After years of pain and loss, Patty's family could finally hope to get justice. Giles was also charged with Tracy's murder, but the prosecutors faced the problem of convicting him without having found Tracy's body. Because of that, Tracy's case was dropped and Patty's case was pursued. After days of hearing Snohomish County Superior Court, Judge Bruce Weiss found Giles guilty of first-degree murder and sends him to 47.5 years in prison. The sentencing brought great relief to Patty's family, especially her daughter Jessica, who was then in her 20s. She said Giles was the reason she did not get to know her mother and demanded that he be taken away. Tracy's family tried to persuade Giles to divulge the location of Tracy's body, assuring him they had no interest in having him serve more time in jail. They only wanted to give their daughter a befitting burial. However, Giles remained silent all these years. Detective Sharp worked with a psychic in Tracy's case, who said Tracy was dead and her body was dumped in a shaft somewhere. Detective Sharp believed her body was somewhere near the area where her car was found, but the exact location continued to evade the police. The sentencing of Danny Giles brought relief to Patty's family, and also gave hope to Tracy's family that maybe one day they would have the opportunity to give Tracy a befitting burial. The story of Danny Giles only shows how certain offenders should not be carelessly released into society. Giles murdered Tracy and Patty during an 8-month period when he was on the run from authorities for second-degree theft. What do you think should be done to offenders like Giles? How best do you think they should be handled so they do not pose a threat to society? Share your thoughts in the comments section. Before we proceed, I've got an exciting surprise for you. We've launched a brand new channel dedicated to intriguing content such as old historical mysteries, cold cases, and particularly chilling horror stories perfect for bedtime. Drop a comment letting us know if you're a fan of horror stories or not. You can find the link in the description below. Let's find out who will be the first to explore it. Alright, let's dive back into the video. Althea Oakley was raised in Arroyo Hondo, close to Taos, New Mexico. After graduating from Taos High School in 1984, she was named Taos Fiesta Princess in 1985. She then pursued her studies at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. On June 22, 1988, 21-year-old Althea went to visit her boyfriend at his fraternity house near campus. Following an argument, Althea left the house by herself. Police believe she went to a nearby duck pond to thank after the disagreement. She had driven to the frat house, but apparently decided to leave her car there and walk back to the home she was sharing with her brother, Russell. At 8:42 p.m., at least 3 witnesses in the 1300 block of Buena Vista Southeast, 6 blocks away from Althea's home, heard a scream. When one of them looked outside, they saw Althea, who said, "I've been stabbed," before she fell to the ground. Althea had sustained several stab wounds to her torso. She was rushed to the University of New Mexico Hospital, but she died during surgery. Her funeral services were held at Our Lady of Sorrows Church in Arroyo Hondo. Police were able to get a description of Althea's killer from one of the witnesses from the scene. They described the perpetrator as a Hispanic male, approximately 20 to 24 years old, who stood 5 feet 7 to 5 feet 9 inches tall and weighed about 140 pounds. He had a medium build and short dark brown hair. He had been wearing a white t-shirt, faded blue jeans, and white tennis shoes with a black stripe down the sides. A sketch of him was created and distributed, but Althea's killer remained unidentified. On August 16, 2021, Albuquerque police were finally able to visit Althea's parents and inform them that they believed they had their daughter's killer in custody. The man who got to deliver the news was Albuquerque Police Chief Harold Medina, a native of Taos who had connections to Althea and her family. When Althea was running for Taos Fiesta Queen, she needed the help of a seamstress to construct and fit her elaborate traditional outfit. The seamstress was Chief Medina's mother. He remembered how Althea would always be sure to smile and say hello to him when she was at his home to see his mother. "I always remembered her. Just the way she introduced herself to me and Mom was just like somebody who's confident and full of joy," Medina said in an interview with the Albuquerque Journal. "I mean, I saw this happen for my entire life. When Fiesta candidates come in, I saw different personalities over the years. Without a doubt, I can say hers was the most bubbly, positive personality. I think my mom would say that too." In addition, when he graduated from Taos High School in 1990, Harold Medina was the first recipient of the scholarship the Oakley family had established in Althea's name. As he advanced through the ranks once he entered law enforcement, he used the connections he made to keep tabs on Althea's case. Following his promotions in 2012 and 2018, he asked the investigators assigned to Althea's case if new technology had produced any new leads, but they never identified anything strong enough to move the case forward. 3 days after Chief Medina's meeting with the Oakleys on August 19, 2021, 53-year-old Paul Raymond Apodaca was formally charged with Althea's murder. That day should have been Althea's 55th birthday. Apodaca made his first appearance in court the following day. When he was charged, Apodaca was already in police custody. He had an extensive criminal record and was custody in the summer of 2021 for a probation violation. His most notorious crime was the 1995 rape of one of his young family members. Apodaca told a judge he had committed that crime because his younger brother Mark had just been convicted of murder, and he wanted to go to prison with him. Paul was sentenced to 20 years in prison, which he was not allowed to serve at the same institution where his brother was incarcerated. In March of 2021, Apodaca pleaded guilty to a charge of assault with a deadly weapon and was sentenced to 3 years of supervised probation. On July 16th, he told his probation officer that he would be staying at the Westside homeless shelter until he could get into an inpatient program or a halfway house, as he did not have anywhere to stay at the time. 3 days later, however, his probation officer received word that Apodaca had failed to report to the shelter, and his electronic monitoring device showed that he was instead sleeping behind a local Walgreens. He was arrested on July 20th for violating his probation. Following his arrest, Apodaca began confessing to crimes that had been committed years earlier. One of those crimes was the murder of a female student back in 1988. In 1988, Apodaca had been working as a security guard at the Technical Vocational Institute, which today is Central New Mexico Community College. The school is less than a mile away from where Althea was killed. One night in June, he saw a young woman walking alone and wanted to talk to her, but she walked away before he did. He then began following her in his vehicle for several blocks. He then decided he wanted to hold her at knife point and then rape her. He drove ahead of her, parked his vehicle, got out of it, and waited for her. When she reached him, she smiled at him and said hi as she walked past him. "That's the worst part. I heard someone that smiles at you," Apodaca said during his confession. Instead of abducting and assaulting her, Apodaca stabbed her several times. He ran away when a witness saw him. When asked why he had wanted to attack the woman, Apodaca told investigators, "When I thought about it, what made me do it, what made me attack her, was all the hatred I had women. Because growing up, I seen men treating women bad and they go for the bad guys. And I try to be nice and good and they just don't want that." Authorities were skeptical of this unsolicited confession. A detective did ask Apodaca if there was any circumstance that inspired him to finally confess. In the eventual criminal complaint filed against Apodaca, that detective wrote, he said no. It was a shame that it took him so long to get to this point. Paul also said he realized what he had done was evil and dark. He said the word of God has helped him overcome the struggle. Apodaca did know some details of the crime that had not been released to the media and remembered the exact outfit Althea Oakley had been wearing when she was killed. A long denim skirt, a red and white striped shirt, and red flats. They were not going to risk the possibility that he had somehow heard these details from some other source, however, and they began investigating the crime again. They interviewed the witnesses from the crime scene and looked into Apodaca's employment history. They were able to confirm that he had been hired at the Technical Vocational Institute in March of 1988 and was still working there in June, based on payroll records. They also had an unusual piece of physical evidence that did tie Apodaca to the scene. Apodaca claimed he had been wearing a distinctive watch his aunt had given him, with a moving moon and sun on it on the day of the murder. He said he had taken it off while waiting for Althea to walk past him because he had assumed there would be struggle when he attacked her. Such a watch had been found in a nearby storm drain near a trail of blood. Following their own investigation and the discovery of the information supporting Apodaca's confession, authorities charged him with Althea's murder. Apodaca has also confessed to other murders and rapes, but authorities have so far not released details on those crimes or any investigations that may be underway in them. Althea's parents have not spoken publicly since Apodaca was charged with their daughter's murder. According to Chief Medina, his meeting with them was emotional and bittersweet, but the news did seem to give them some sense of closure. Chief Medina is now focused on preparing the case against Apodaca and securing his conviction, the final step in getting justice for Althea. In 1985, 28-year-old Denise Stafford was living in Sarasota, Florida with her husband Frank. Frank worked as a bartender at an establishment called the Playground Lounge, and the couple had a 1-year-old daughter. It was Frank who discovered his wife's body in their home in the 300 block of Tarpon Avenue just after 3 a.m. on October 13th when he returned home from work. The couple's daughter was found in her crib in another room, thankfully unharmed. Denise's time of death was estimated to be between 11 p.m. on October 12th and 3:10 a.m. on October 13th when her body was found. There were no signs of forced entry into the home. According to police, there was evidence that Denise had been attacked while she was standing up. However, Denise's body had been found on her bed. She was lying on her back with her head at the foot of the bed, leading police to believe that her killer had placed her on the bed after she was killed. Hundreds of pages of information were compiled in Denise's case file, but despite the best efforts of police, the case went cold. In November of 2020, Sarasota police made a new appeal to the public for information and announced that they hoped that new advancements in DNA technology could help in their investigation. The decades that had passed since Denise's murder did not diminish her family's desire for justice to be done in her case. According to Sarasota Police Department, civilian investigator Jeff Birdwell, when Frank Stafford was asked what should happen to the person responsible for his wife's murder, his immediate response was, "We still have the death penalty, don't we?" It would be the department's efforts to re-examine evidence in the case for DNA that would ultimately lead to them identifying the person they believe committed the murder. When the clothes Denise was found wearing were re-examined, DNA was found on areas on the bottom portion of her pants, near the back of her ankles and behind her knees. Police believe the DNA was transferred there when her killer picked up Denise's body to place it on her bed. Further testing showed that the DNA belonged to Joseph Magaletti Jr. 64-year-old Magaletti had died while serving life in prison in 2015. He had been convicted of the 1995 murder of Kathleen Leonard, one of his former neighbors. She had been strangled, and her killer had emptied out her purse and apparently taken the cash from it. Magaletti was not charged with the murder until 1999 when he was tied to the crime through mitochondrial DNA found in a hair discovered when authorities examined the bindings and ligature used on Kathleen. He was also later tied to the scene through fingerprints, when his fingerprints were found to be a match to prints found on the inside of Kathleen Leonard's apartment door, just below its knob. Magaletti is also considered a suspect in the 1987 abduction and murder of 19-year-old Elizabeth Zia. At the time, he worked delivering water to the video store where Elizabeth was employed. Magaletti worked as a bouncer at the Playground Lounge. This meant he knew Frank Stafford's work schedule and therefore when Denise would be home alone with her daughter. He had also previously visited the Staffords at their home. Since she knew him, Denise may have willingly let him inside the house, explaining the lack of forced entry into the home. The detectives initially assigned to the case in 1985 had come across Magaletti as a person of interest, but they did not have enough evidence at the time to conclusively tie him to Denise's murder. In terms of motive, police believe Magaletti's drug habit may have played a role in the murder. He was known to steal items to resell and commit robberies in order to get cash to use to purchase cocaine. He may have believed that there was something value in this Stafford home he could steal in order to sell for drug money. While Magaletti cannot be tried for Denise's murder or serve time for it, his identification and the fact that he is no longer alive is a comfort for Denise's mother, Dora Nipper. He's not going to harm anyone else. That has been my cry from the beginning. I didn't want to see any other mother go through what our family has, she said following the announcement of the victims, and serve as a warning to perpetrators of cold cases. Victims and serve as a warning to perpetrators of cool cases. It's important for every suspect out there who hasn't been arrested to understand you haven't gotten away with it. Sarasota Police Department civilian investigator Jeff Birdwell, the lead detective on Denise's case, said after Magaletti's identification, "We're still coming. You still need to look over your shoulder. With some effort on our part and with technology, your day is coming." Before we continue, 90% of you haven't subscribed to our channel, so if you like this video, please subscribe. It motivates us to make more content for you. Okay, let's continue. At approximately 3 a.m. on March 17, 1983, a Montgomery County Sheriff's Office deputy was on patrol in the 4000 block of Interstate 45 near League Line Road in Conroe, Texas, when he came across a roadside fire. When he got out of his vehicle to investigate, he found that the fire was in fact the burning body of a nude woman. A cap from an oil accelerant used to set her body on fire. A souvenir pen from a 76 truck stop was found not far away. Subsequent examination of her body would show that the woman had been raped, beaten, and strangled before her body was set on fire. None of these clues or this information helped authorities find the woman's identity, however. Before they found her name, authorities thought they found her killer when Henry Lee Lucas claimed responsibility for her death. Lucas' notoriously Dallas Times Herald article would later refer to Lucas' uncorroborated, frequently debunked, and ultimately recanted confessions as the largest hoax in law enforcement annals. Hundreds of cases were closed based on his confessions, even in cases where evidence showed that Lucas was across the country from where the crime was committed at the time it occurred. Based solely on his confession, in 1986, Lucas was convicted of killing the initially unidentified woman found in Conroe, Texas. That same year, the FBI was finally able to identify the woman as Laura Marie Purchase based on her fingerprints. The last known sighting of Laura occurred in Houston, Texas on March 5, 1983, 12 days before her body was found. At the time she went missing, Laura was believed to have been living with a man named Howard or Howie who played in a local band called Malibu. They may have been living in a motel on the North Freeway. Howard or Howie never reported Laura missing, and police were never able to find him to interview him. Semen had been found on Laura's body, and in 2007, the Cold Case Squad at the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office submitted it for DNA testing. In 2008, the results of that testing showed that the DNA found on Laura's body did not belong to Henry Lee Lucas, nor did it belong to his frequent criminal cohort, Addis Toole. Laura's case is one of more than 20 in which DNA has excluded Lucas from a murder which he previously claimed to have committed. The contributor of the DNA would not be identified until 2021. In November of 2019, the DNA from Laura's body was submitted for genealogical testing, and an initial report was issued the following April. Further 38 years to the day after Laura's body was found, Montgomery County investigators arrived at the Kansas City, Kansas home of that suspect to collect a DNA sample directly from him. On April 30th, test results confirmed that his DNA was a match to that found on Laura Purchase's body. A warrant was then issued for his arrest. On May 11th, 2021, 75-year-old Thomas Elvin Darnell was arrested at his home in Kansas City. He was subsequently extradited to Montgomery County on May 20th and charged with capital murder. Darnell never stood trial for Laura's murder, however, as he died in the Montgomery County Jail on July 26, 2021. A preliminary investigation determined that Darnell apparently died of natural causes related to his medical history, although his exact cause of death is still pending based on the results of his autopsy. According to a press release from the Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, Darnell suffered from numerous medical conditions and had been in declining health. He had been under hospice care at the time of his death. Donna Sue Black Hyatt was born on August 28, 1948, in Carlsbad, Eddy County, New Mexico, to Roger and Sybil Black. She had a vibrant spirit that made a significant impact on those around her. As she matured, her personality continued to shine even brighter. Donna attended New Mexico State University in Carlsbad. With strong faith guiding her, she became an active member of the First Baptist Church, drawing comfort and strength from its community. She was also involved with the Christians Women's Club, where she formed lasting connections and brought joy to everyone she met. She became a devoted mother to two beautiful girls, Michelle Perry and Angela Hulsey. She was beautiful inside and out, loved by her family and cherished by the community. Her story of love and faith sadly ended in brutality when her life was abruptly taken away, leaving her family scared. On the fateful night of July 8, 1987, one of Donna's daughters came home late. As the moon cast its pale glow on Elm Street and the clock inched closer to 11:40 p.m., the girl went around the house looking for Donna. To her shock, she found her mother lying lifeless in a large pool of blood. Donna Sue Hyatt had been assaulted and killed in her own home. She was 38 years old. The daughter made a frantic call to the police that same night, and with it, the wheels of the investigation began to turn. The police searched the crime scene for any clues that could unveil the murderer, but whoever killed Donna was no amateur and had carefully covered all tracks. The detectives could only find traces of DNA that they hoped would lead to a potential suspect. With no breakthroughs at the crime scene, investigators attempted to retrace Donna's last moments, looking for any shred of information. Witnesses came forward saying they had seen Donna leaving a nearby store with a tall Caucasian man around 9:15 p.m., the same night she died. Questions gripped the detectives. Was he a predator lurking in the shadows, biding his time until the opportune moment presented itself? Or did Donna's path intersect with another individual that night? A chance encounter that took a fateful turn. The haunting hours between 9:15 p.m. and 11:40 p.m. held the key to unraveling Donna's fate. However, there were too many possibilities and not enough leads. There was no way of knowing if she had invited the killer inside, if the killer had followed her home and forcibly entered, or if the killer simply had a key. These theories meant everyone was a suspect in the eyes of justice. The autopsy report revealed that Donna had been stabbed using a sharp blade of some kind. The experts analyzed the DNA, found at the crime scene and discovered that it did not belong to Donna or any frequent visitors of the house. The DNA of this unidentified person gave some initial hope to figuring out the killer's identity. But unfortunately, the police database showed no matches for their profile. Days turned into weeks into years, but no tips came in and the investigative wheels slowly ground to a halt. The man who was seen with Donna that night became an enigmatic figure, a phantom whose identity remained elusive. Each lead was pursued, yet like whispers carried away by the wind, the trail grew cold, fading into the shadows of time. Decades passed, but the memory of that fateful night lingered in the collective consciousness of the Carlsbad Police Department. 36 years later, in 2023, Detective Joey Landgraf and Detective Tim Neese were ready to breathe life back into a long-forgotten case. They began reviewing the cold homicide case to find the elusive killer. Aware of the recent advancements in forensic technology, the detectives took help from genetic genealogy. In the realm of genetic genealogy, DNA, the building blocks of life are the threads that connect past and present and can unearth criminals by exploring their familial ties. Crime scene evidence from Donna's home on Elm Street, carefully collected and preserved for over 3 decades, found its way into the hands of a meticulous scientist at Botham, a private genetic genealogy company based in Texas. They used forensic-grade genome sequencing, or FGGS, to build a digital DNA profile of the suspect. Otham's team meticulously scoured online genealogy databases to find a match for the profile. Finally, in the labyrinth of ancestral records and hidden bloodlines, a name rose to the surface: Michael Ruff Wigley. Michael Ruff Wigley, from the city of Vegas, Texas, was born on March 6, 1959. At the tender age of 19, he was stationed at or hood as a soldier. But behind the facade of military discipline lurked a hidden malevolence that would shatter many lives. One of his early victims was Sandra Bellman, an innocent 18-year-old newlywed brimming with the dreams of new life. But her journey through blissful matrimony was brutally cut short on July 18, 1980. Found near Copares Cove, Texas, her lifeless body bore the scars of violence. It was revealed that she was beaten to death. Wigley was immediately arrested after the incident, and his indictment took place on October 1, 1980, where he was charged with the murder of Sandra. But the horrors did not end there, as there was an even darker revelation: a charge of assault against a Keelan woman committed on June 30, 1980, just 18 days prior to Sandra's murder. Soon enough, Whitley found himself confined within the cold embrace of the Corio County Jail. Bonds totaling $50,000, he was eventually released from prison and lived the life of a free man. But fate had other plans for him. On October 11, 1989, Wigley was driving along the northbound lane of US Route 60 in his 1978 Ford Mustang. Wigley's mind may have wandered, for he did not slow or stop at the railway intersection despite the warning wails of an oncoming Santa Fe railway train. The fatal collision that followed was so powerful that the train carried the remnants of Wigley's Mustang for 0.6 of a mile. Michael Ruff was 30 years old when he lost his life. He was buried in Milano Cemetery in Amarillo, Texas. Upon compiling new DNA information in relation to the existing case evidence, Detective Landgraf and Detective Neese identified Wigley as the prime suspect through a series of interviews with family members. They were able to prove Wigley had been present in Carlsbad, New Mexico, around the time Donna was murdered. Even though he had already died and would not get the punishment he deserved, the investigators were keen to prove his guilt without a doubt and close the cold case. Finally, they obtained a warrant to exhume Wigley's body in Amarillo, Texas. Working with tandem with law enforcement officials in Amarillo, Wigley's once-forgotten grave was unearthed and the remains were quickly sent to Othram for analysis. The stage was set, the pieces were in motion, and the dance with destiny had begun. With the use of kinship testing, the experts at Othram tested Wigley's DNA against the profile created using crime scene evidence. The city of Carlsbad lent its unwavering support in the form of financial assistance. The results were generated on April 11, 2023. Unsurprisingly, his DNA held the undeniable markers that led him to the crime scene and proved his guilt. It was a perfect match. Michael Ruff Wigley, though deceased, was accused of claiming Donna Sue Hyatt's life in 1987. Detective Joey Landgraf and Tim Nice of the Carlsbad Police Department emerged as the unsung heroes who had tirelessly pieced together the fragments of a decades-old puzzle. Their unwavering commitment and foresight proved instrumental in finally bringing closure to a haunting chapter in the city's history. Carlsbad Mayor Dale Janway expressed heartfelt appreciation for the officers and detectives from 1987 who valiantly responded to the haunting scene that fateful night. Their role in preserving the crime scene's integrity and diligently collecting crucial evidence was the pivotal factor that allowed the case to finally be solved 36 years later. It is our sincere hope that the recent efforts and the efforts of those involved in 1987 can bring some small form of peace and closure to the family of Donna Sue Hyatt and the community of Carlsbad, Janaway said. What do you think led to this horrific murder? Do you think it was a planned murder or a crime committed at whim? Let us know your thoughts in the comment section below. Maureen Brubaker was born on July 4, 1954, and her patriotic birthday led many to believe she would be a firecracker, a prediction that proved accurate. Her mother, Mary, and later described her as the wild child of the family. As the eldest of 7 children, Maureen was a devoted and affectionate sister to her 4 brothers and 2 sisters. One of her youngest sister Lisa's earliest memories, who is 13 years younger than Maureen, is of sitting on Maureen's lap in a car while Maureen's husband drove them one night. Maureen was teaching Lisa to sing the Christmas carol Silver Bells as they listened to it on the radio. Maureen would babysit her younger siblings for her parents, who knew that handling so many young children was a challenge, so they offered their younger children 10 cents each if they behaved for their sister while they were gone. Even if the younger children fought with each other or otherwise misbehaved, Maureen would always report to her parents that they had all behaved wonderfully for her when they returned home so that all of her siblings would receive their dime. As close as she was, did not always listen to her parents or do what they thought was best. When she was 16, Maureen asked her parents if she could marry her boyfriend, David Farley. They told her they did not like the idea of her getting married, but Maureen and David married anyway. Maureen's parents could have asked the court to annul the marriage, but Maureen threatened to leave home and never speak to them again if they did, so they did not pursue that option. Shortly after the marriage, Maureen's husband David was arrested. Police have not publicly disclosed what he was charged with, but the Brubakers believe he was arrested for burglary. David was sent to the Anamosa State Penitentiary outside of Cedar Rapids, Iowa, to serve his short sentence. Maureen moved to Cedar Rapids so she could visit her husband while he was incarcerated. Her younger siblings were upset by the move as Cedar Rapids was on the opposite side of the state as their home in Sioux City. Maureen rented a room in Cedar Rapids and found a job nearby as a waitress at Waita's restaurant. She wrote letters and sent photos to her family regularly and called them when she had the money to. On September 17, 1971, Maureen borrowed some money to buy a pack of cigarettes. Her paycheck from the restaurant will be ready later that day, so she would quickly be able to pay back the money. However, she never came to the restaurant that night to collect the paycheck she so desperately needed as she was out of money. She likewise did not arrive at the restaurant for her shift on Monday 20th, which was unusual for the dependable employee. Her co-workers were worried about her, so they went to her rented room to see if she was there. She was not, so they reported Maureen missing to the police. Police in Cedar Rapids contacted their counterparts in Sioux City to have them check if Maureen had simply gone to visit her family. When the police arrived at the Brubaker family home, they asked if Maureen was there and informed the family she was missing when they learned she was not at the house. Maureen's father was unable to get off work and her mother had to stay to care for her youngest children, but 2 of Maureen's siblings made the 4-hour drive to Cedar Rapids to help look for her. Maureen would not be found until a week after she was last seen alive. On September 24, 1971, 2 teenage boys were out hunting in a wooded area approximately 3 miles away from Maureen's rented room. In the bed of an abandoned truck in a wooded ravine near what was then a landfill and is now Tate Cummins Park, they saw a woman lying down with one leg propped up. She was wearing clothes but no shoes. The 2 boys assumed she was sleeping and continued on their way. When they passed by the area again, however, they noticed that the woman in the truck was in the exact same position she had been in when they saw her earlier. They decided to approach the truck to get a closer look. When they did, they saw that the woman's skin was discolored and realized she was dead. The woman in the truck was Maureen Brubaker Farley. She was just 17 years old at the time of her death. Maureen had been struck in the head, which had resulted in a severe skull fracture. Based on the level of decomposition, authorities believe Maureen had not died until several days after she sustained the injury. She would have been sexually assaulted. Police believe Maureen had been killed elsewhere and then later placed in the truck. When police began investigating the murder, they found no signs of struggle inside of Maureen's rented room, and her car was still parked outside. They conducted interviews but were never able to make an arrest. Maureen's killer would remain unidentified for decades until advances in science and technology provided new uses for evidence preserved in the case. In 2006, cold case investigators submitted a swab taken from Maureen's body to the lab to see if there was any unknown DNA present. A full DNA profile from an unknown male was developed from semen found on the swab, but there was no match to the profile incremental databases. The case was looked at once again in 2017, and investigators began collecting DNA samples from suspects who had been identified in the early days of the inn. Could not collect a DNA sample from one major suspect because he had died in 2013 at the age of 94. The man in question had worked at a liquor store near the restaurant where Maureen had worked and was a regular customer of hers there. He reportedly was friendly to her and offered to help her with her car. Maureen's mother, Mary Ann, had written to police 6 months after her daughter's murder, telling them that she believed he was the person who had killed Maureen. Police were also suspicious of this man. He had been interviewed extensively but had refused to take a polygraph. He had continued to visit the police station in the months after Maureen's murder, asking about the investigation. Police found the suspicious but had no evidence to show he was responsible for Maureen's murder. That changed in the spring of 2021, when police were able to obtain a search warrant, allowing them to collect a DNA sample from the man's daughter for comparison to the male DNA found on Maureen's body. The sample was collected and sent to the lab. On September 24, 2021, 50 years to the day after Maureen's body was discovered, police the results of the analysis from the lab. Testing confirmed that the DNA found on Maureen's body had come from the father of the woman whose DNA had been submitted, the man the Brubaker family had long suspected, George M. Smith. Maureen's father passed away in 2002. 2 of Maureen's brothers also passed away before learning who killed their sister. Maureen's mother and 4 surviving siblings are satisfied with the evidence and the formal closure of the case. While Smith may not have had to face justice in this life, Maureen's mother believes he will still face consequences and is relieved she and her family have some measure of closure. "We just figure he'll suffer in hell for it," Mary and Brubaker told the Sioux City Journal. "What's done is done, and at least we know it was him and we can quit wondering. We can let it go." On Thursday, June 9, 1977, 17-year-old Eric Goldstrand and 16-year-old Liana Edank spent the day fishing and swimming at the Broken Bowl picnic grounds near Fall Creek, Oregon. The high school sweethearts were on summer break from North Eugene High School in Eugene, Oregon, where they each had a close circle of friends. The couple drove east on Highway 58 in Eric's truck, carrying the picnic lunch his mother had prepared for them. They were expected to return home by 10 o'clock that night, but they did not arrive as planned. Earlier in the evening, Eric had called home to inform his father that he was experiencing problems with the truck. He asked him to come looking for him if he and Liana did not arrive home one time. Eric's parents, Ted and Donna, therefore then drove out to the picnic area. There, they located the truck, but not Eric and Liana. Their clothes were inside of the truck, so Ted and Donna knew that wherever their son and his girlfriend were, they were only dressed in their swimsuits. Eric's parents then notified law enforcement, and a Lane County Sheriff's deputy arrived on the scene to help search for the 2 missing teenagers. The deputy and Ted went out to search while Donna stayed behind with the truck. They located Liana's body in a secluded area within the picnic grounds. She had been raped and then shot. Ted took Donna home for the evening, telling her the search would resume in the morning. He did not tell her that Liana had been found dead and that the picnic area was now a crime scene. The next morning, Eric's parents were notified that Eric's body had also been found several hours after Liana was located. His body was found in a group of bushes and he had also been shot. An extensive investigation was launched to find Liana and Eric's killer. A massive search was held, and roadblocks went up throughout the area in the immediate aftermath of the murders. Numerous interviews were performed and polygraph examinations were administered. Several bullets and suspect firearms were examined. Fingerprints were found at the scene, but at the time, no match could be found to them. Despite ongoing efforts, no arrests were made in the case. Detective Ken West was first assigned to work Liana and Eric's case in 1983. He later retired and began volunteering 1 day a week with the Lane County Sheriff's Office cold case team, working alongside Chuck Tilley, who had retired after 3 decades with the Eugene Police Department, and Kirk Engdahl, a retired state and federal prosecutor. DNA evidence had been found and preserved at the crime scene, but there was little investigators could do with it in 1977. Decades later, however, this would be the evidence that finally identified the young couple's killer. In July of 2020, the DNA from the scene was run again and Parban Nanolabs was brought in to analyze the profile. They were able to generate an image of what the killer may have looked like based on his DNA. They also used genetic genealogy to try to identify him based on his relatives. They ultimately determined that the killer was most likely one of 3 members of a family from Oak Ridge, Oregon. Only one of these family members was still local. Investigators were able to surreptitiously collect the butt of a cigarette he had smoked, and the DNA found on it eliminated him as a suspect. This left 2 brothers, who were then living in Mesa, Arizona, as potential suspects. Authorities in Oregon began arranging to collect their DNA and bring the case to a grand jury once they conclusively determined which brother was their suspect. However, on February 24, 2021, the 2 brothers got into an altercation. The younger of the brothers was injured during the fight, and the police were called. Before they arrived on the scene, the older brother took his own life. While he will never know for sure, Kurt West suspects that the older brother may have ended his life rather than come in contact with the police, in part because his involvement in Liana and Eric's murders and the DNA he had left at the scene may have still been at the back of his mind. The surviving brother cooperated with police, answering questions about his older brother. Delays in the final DNA testing went on for months, but on September 23, 2021, more than 44 years after Liana and Eric were killed, the Lane County Sheriff's Office announced that the DNA found at the crime scene belonged to Ronald Albert Troy. Troy had been 23 years old at the time of the murders and had recently been discharged from the military. He was a Lane County resident in 1977 but left Oregon in the early 1980s, eventually moving to Mesa in 2008. It's a relief he's not going to be able to hurt anyone again. But there's a part of us who wanted to see him and know why. And all these things we're never going to know, Liana's cousin, Kathy Kloster, said after Troy's identification. Eric's mother, Donna, does see a silver lining in Troy's suicide as she was terrified of having to go through a trial and what could happen if Troy somehow managed to get acquitted. The DNA testing performed in the case by the cold case unit was funded with donations made to the unit by the public. Liana and Eric's families are grateful to the investigators who never gave up on the case. They hope the resolution of the case will give hope to other families still waiting for answers in cold cases and serve as a reminder to criminals that while they may not have been caught yet, they may still one day have police come knocking on their door. In July of 1991, 17-year-old Patricia Moreno, known to her loved ones as Tricia, was in the care of the Department of Social Services. She had been living in one of their foster homes on Henry Street in Malden, Massachusetts for the past 2 months. Tricia's foster mother did not allow smoking inside the home, so Tricia would often go out onto the 3rd-floor apartment's fire escape to smoke cigarettes. The fire escape is where Tricia would be found at approximately 3 a.m. on July 20th, having been shot in the head. Tricia was rushed to Massachusetts General Hospital, where she died as a result of her injuries 30 years. On September 29, 2021, Middlesex County District Attorney Marion Ryan announced that a grand jury had returned an indictment for first-degree murder and that 48-year-old Rodney Daniels of South Fulton, Georgia had been charged in connection with Tricia's murder. He had been arrested without incident at his home in Georgia on September 27th and would be extradited back to Massachusetts. Daniels had been dating one of the two teenage daughters of Trisha's foster mother and sometimes stayed at their apartment. In 1991, he told police he had been asleep on an armchair in the apartment's living room when he was awoken by 2 gunshots. He went out onto the fire escape where he found Trisha, critically injured. Trisha's foster mother then called 911. Police learned that Daniels had been aggressive and threatening towards shortly before her death to Daniels standing in her bedroom. He had a gun in his hand, which he then pointed at Trisha's head. Trisha's foster mother never reported this to the police or to the Department of Social Services. These same documents detail accounts of Daniels bragging about the police failing to find gunpowder residue on him and telling Trisha's foster mother, "Yes, you can," after she said that a person could not get away with murder. Police were able to confirm that Daniels had been in possession of multiple handguns prior to Trisha's murder. In 2020, Trisha's case was re-examined by the Middlesex District Attorney's Office Cold Case Unit, which had been formed the year before. They returned to the apartment where Trisha had been killed and meticulously recreated the crime scene. They determined, based on the angle of the bullet that killed Trisha, that her killer had fired shot near the door back into the apartment she had been living in. In addition, investigators were able to locate a witness who had just returned to the United States after an extended period of time outside of the country. He had lived in a second-floor apartment in 1991 and had been awoken by the gunshots when Trisha was killed. Because of the location of his bed in his bedroom and the location of his window, when he woke up, he was looking directly out at the crime scene. He was able to provide police with a description of the man out on the fire escape with Trisha, and, more importantly, he reported that he had seen the man go inside of Trisha's apartment after the shooting. There had been no signs of forced entry into the apartment, and no one who had been known to be inside of the apartment had reported seeing anyone else there. Trisha's foster sister, Chantel, who had been dating Daniels at the time of the murder, testified on his behalf at a 1991 grand jury hearing. However, in private, she told her younger sister, Rochelle, that on the night of the murder, Daniels had confessed to her that he had killed Trisha and then hid the gun in a hole in the chair where he slept in the living room. He told her later he had gotten rid of the weapon. Rochelle had begged Chantel to go to the police with his information throughout the years that followed, but Chantel never would. She feared getting into legal trouble for lying to the grand jury to protect Daniels originally. Chantel died of COVID-19 in 2020, and Rochelle told police about what Chantal had told her about the murder and her dishonesty during a 2021 interview with them, since Chantal could no longer face any legal consequences. Daniels was arraigned in Middlesex Superior Court on September 30th. He is being held without bail and is due back in court on October 21st. Kristen Hatfield was born in Oklahoma County to her mother, Shannon Hatfield. Details about her father are scarce. Shannon became a single mother and lived with Kristen's uncles while raising her daughters, Kristen and Faith. In 1997, Kristen was a second grader at Traub Elementary School in Midwest City, Oklahoma. On May 13, 1997, Shannon followed their regular bedtime routine, tucking Kristen and Faith into bed around 11:30 p.m. Little did Shannon know this would be the final moment she would see one of her daughters. She left the bedroom door slightly open and went to bed. Around 3 a.m. in the morning, she heard strange noises coming from the girl's bedroom. Though the thought of Faith talking in her sleep came to Shannon's mind, she still went to investigate. But by the time she reached the room, the noise had stopped. Oddly, she noticed that the door, which she had left slightly ajar, was now closed. Reluctant to disturb her daughters during the night, Shannon went back to sleep, a decision she would forever regret. The next morning on May 14, 1997, around 6 to 6:30 a.m., Shannon went to wake up her girls. Kristen's sister, Faith, was asleep nearby, but Kristen was not in her bed. She was missing. Shannon searched around the house. She asked Faith where Kristen was, but she knew nothing. Kristen's mother immediately called the police to report her disappearance. Except for the faint whining Shannon heard earlier, no one else in the house heard anything suspicious like a scream or signs of a struggle. It's believed that Kristen had already disappeared from her room at that time. Shannon heard the noise. If her mother had looked inside the bedroom when she heard the sounds of Fate whining, she would have seen that Kristen was gone. They could have started searching earlier and perhaps discovered something sooner. But this was not realized until the next day when Kristen's mother noticed something unusual. The bedroom door was closed, which was not normal. The police initially considered the possibility that Kristen had left the house on her own during the night. They speculated that she might have gone to a friend's house, taken a walk around the neighborhood, or visited a nearby park. Although it may have seemed unusual, there were cases where children had left their homes at night and wandered around only to be found later. However, in Kristen's case, the police's assumption turned out to be incorrect and their initial theory was proven wrong. Upon examining Kristen's room, the police noticed that her window was slightly open and found a small blood stain on the windowsill. They searched the house and the yard for clues. Outside, they discovered Kristen's bunched-up underwear against the fence, also stained with blood. It was evident that Kristen hadn't simply wandered off on her own. She had been abducted, putting her in immediate danger. The police understood the urgency of the situation and knew that time was critical. Kristen was last seen at 11:30 p.m. the previous night, and her disappearance was discovered at 6:30 a.m. the next morning, a span of 7 hours where anything could have occurred. The police quickly began searching the neighborhood, questioning neighbors about any sightings of Kristen or any unusual activity during the night. One resident reported hearing dogs barking around 2 to 3 a.m., but didn't find anything suspicious when he investigated. Blood samples from the underwear and windowsill were sent to the lab for analysis. Surprisingly, the results indicated that the blood did not belong to Kristen. It was from an unidentified male. Now Kristen's mother was a single mom. Kristen and Faith lived in their uncle's house with her. Shannon also had a history of drug abuse. Kristen's uncles and their families were not very fond of Shannon. Considering Kristen's family issues, the police didn't exclude any family members as potential suspects or individuals who might have knowledge about her disappearance. They thoroughly investigated everyone and followed up on every lead and tip they received. However, none of these avenues yielded any significant information, leading to a quick stagnation in the case. Over the years, Kristen's name faded from the public conversation, and she became known as the girl occasionally featured on missing person flyers around town. Nonetheless, her family remained determined to find answers, and the police were equally committed to not giving up on the case. 18 years after Kristen's disappearance, in June 2015, a new team joined the investigation into Kristen's disappearance. Taking a fresh approach, they decided to resubmit the DNA samples found on the window and the victim's underwear to the database. With advancements in technology as time passed, they hoped to find a match. DNA analysis was still developing in the late 90s, so someone who wasn't in the system then might be now. Chief Brandon Claves of the Midwest City Police Department had an unwavering determination to solve the case. Detective Miller also felt a strong connection to it. Miller and Brandon agreed to work on the case together. They possessed a complete male DNA profile from the crime scene, matching the bloodstains on the window and the underwear. Their first step was running the DNA samples through COITUS, the combined DNA index system. Unfortunately, they did not find a match, but they remained hopeful. They had a list of approximately 100 men to consider since the DNA belonged to a male. They eliminated individuals who were clearly not involved and focused on those who seemed suspicious. They planned to visit them and collect DNA samples for comparison to the DNA found in 1997. One person of interest was a 55-year-old Anthony Palma, the neighbor who recalled hearing dogs barking around 2 to 3 a.m. on the night of the disappearance. Initially, he wasn't deemed suspicious during the questioning in 1997 when he was 38 years old. Palma claimed he was at home when Kristen went missing, going to bed around 2 to 3 a.m. after hearing the dogs barking. In 1997, he was questioned due to his proximity to the Hatfield and his alleged yard work for them, which he oddly denied. He also denied knowing Kristen's mother. In June 2015, investigators decided to revisit Palma. His wife mentioned his emotional reaction to Kristen's disappearance and his familiarity with the family. Palmer recalled seeing a white Chevy truck at the Hatfield home the day Kristen vanished. He agreed to provide a DNA sample via a mouth swab. On July 22, 2015, the Oregon State Bureau of Investigation confirmed that Palma's DNA matched the DNA found at the crime scene. As investigators reviewed the old case file, they discovered discrepancies between the information provided by Palma and the contents of the file. They couldn't find any documentation that his house had been searched in 1997. Detective Miller received the results and he exclaimed, "Anthony Palma was the killer." The DNA from the windowsill and underwear matched Palma's despite his claims of being deeply affected by the case. He had lied to the police. They never searched his home in 1997, raising suspicions about what might have been found then. Initially, Palma denied knowing the family, but Kristen's mother remembered a conversation with him that left her uneasy. However, in her heightened state after her daughter's disappearance, she hadn't considered him a likely suspect and viewed everyone as strange and suspicious. But the friendly neighbor, Palma, already had secrets hidden in his life's history. Anthony Palma was born in 1959. The police found out that Palma had already served a year and a half of a 5-year sentence long before he even lived beside the Hatfields. During his trial, another woman testified that Palma had drugged and assaulted her when she was 17. This revealed a pattern of troubling behavior. Authorities then delved into Palma's past and found disturbing incidents. In 1980, he was suspected of breaking into his girlfriend's sister's bedroom, assaulting her, and escaping before getting caught. The police saw his truck parked nearby but lacked evidence for an arrest. He assaulted and attacked his landlord, leading to a conviction for assault and battery. Shockingly, Palma had been living near the Hatfields' home for 7 years. Christian was just 1 year old at the time he had moved there. Authorities were both thrilled to connect him to the case and stunned that he had been right under their noses all along. The impact on the family could only be imagined. Returning to the case by October 12, 2015, the investigators had gathered enough evidence to interview Palma. They asked him if he remembered anything unusual about the day or even before Kristen's disappearance. Palma responded by denying any involvement with Kristen or her family except for seeing a white truck in front of their yard. He claimed that he typically spent his time working on his yard and fixing neighbors' bikes, but denied calling the kids over to his house. He mentioned having a daughter named Christy who often played with the neighborhood kids. When asked if he had seen Kristen and her mother Shannon around the neighborhood, Palma claimed to have seen Kristen playing with another girl named Crystal, but he couldn't recall the specific time frame. He stated that he was generally cautious around people and didn't pay much attention to who was there. Palma denied having any interactions with Kristen, never recalling helping her with her bike or talking to her. He asserted that he didn't know Kristen or her family and wasn't aware of how long they had lived there. On the night of May 13, 1997, Palma said he didn't leave his house. He mentioned that his dog barked at the back fence, assuming it was due to the presence of other animals or dogs in the area. Palma didn't investigate further and simply called the dog inside before going back to bed. Palma expressed suspicion towards Shannon for leaving the house, believing that she should have stayed in case Kristen returned or received a call. Palma brought up Shannon's drug use and mentioned allowing her brother, who was helping search for Kristen, to stay at his place temporarily. When asked if Shannon's brother confided in him or provided any useful information, Palma denied it. During the interview, the investigators confronted Palma with the DNA evidence. His DNA was found on the window seal of Kristen's room and on the underwear discovered in the backyard. Despite his earlier claims of never being in the backyard or having any contact with Kristen, Palma's repeated denial and lack of explanation for his DNA being present raised suspicions. Although there could be legitimate reasons for his DNA to be found in someone else's backyard, Palma's previous statements contradict the evidence, leaving him with no credible explanation. After 18 years, on October 12, 2015, the same day after his interrogation, Anthony Palma was arrested and charged with the kidnapping and presumed first-degree murder of 8-year-old Kristen Hatfield. During the trials in 2017, he pleaded not guilty, but on October 13, 2017, he was found guilty. On November 27, 2017, the jury convicted him, and he received a life sentence without parole. Surprisingly, he chose not to appeal his conviction, which is unusual for someone claiming innocence. Despite multiple opportunities, Palmer refused to disclose the location of Kristen's remains. Shannon, Kristen's mother, wrote to him in prison 3 times, but he asked her to stop. On January 11, 2019, Palmer was strangled to death by a cellmate who was serving a life sentence for a first-degree murder. He was 59 years old. Although Palmer likely knew where Kristen's remains were, the family still hoped that someone else might have received that information and will come forward. Shannon displayed compassion by expressing forgiveness and not wanting Palmer's life to end in such a manner. The case was considered solved, although the location of Kristen's body remained unknown. T was found. Inside the house, they did find children's teeth, but they belonged to Palmer's own daughter as he had kept them after playing the Tooth Fairy. Kristen's family chose to forgive Palmer for what he had done, hoping that their forgiveness would lead him to reveal the location of Kristen's body. Unfortunately, he never did. She had already expressed her forgiveness in a letter to Palmer, wishing he would find it in his heart to provide the information they sought. The abduction of Kristen Hatfield was a case that made the alliance of forensic science with criminology more substantial. But Kristen's body is still not found. On November 20th, 2006, around 3 p.m., 2 women were walking along a path through the marshy area behind the Golden Key Hotel, one of several rundown motels on Black Horse Pike in West Atlantic City, Egg Harbor Township, New Jersey. They noticed a woman's body partially submerged in a drainage ditch behind the motel and promptly called the police. When the authorities arrived, they found the body the women had reported. As they continued searching the area, they also discovered the bodies of 3 additional women in the same drainage ditch. The bodies were all found along the ditch, spaced out no more than 50 yards apart from one another. None of the bodies had purses, wallets, or identification with them. They were all fully clothed, except they were all missing their socks and shoes. They had all been found with their heads pointing east towards Atlantic City. Authorities would soon come to believe that all 4 women had been killed by the same perpetrator. The orientation of the bodies and their proximity to the eastbound lane of the Atlantic City Expressway would lead to their unknown killer being frequently referred to as the Eastbound Strangler, among other monikers. Based on the levels of decomposition present in the 4 bodies, police believed all 4 victims had been killed at different times. The first victim had been killed as early as 6 weeks prior to the discovery of her body. The second victim was killed approximately 2 weeks later. The third died approximately a week after the second victim, and the fourth was killed approximately a week after that, shortly before the bodies were found on November 20th. The body that had brought the police to the scene and the most recent to have been killed belonged to 35-year-old Kim Raffo. Kim had grown up in the Brooklyn neighborhood of Canarsie. Both her young parents had struggled with substance abuse, but despite the issues at home, Kim was a loving and happy child who was always smiling. As Kim entered adulthood, she seemed to be on the right path towards a more stable life. She married her husband, Hugh, in 1989, and the couple moved to Florida to be with Kim's sister and mother, who had divorced Kim's father in 1988. Hugh found a good job working in construction, and the couple purchased a 4-bedroom home in Pembroke Pines. Kim and Hugh welcomed a daughter in 1992 and a son in 1994. In addition to her own children, Kim also helped take care of her sister's 2 children. She was active volunteering with the PDA and Girl Scouts, and her next-door neighbor reported that Kim and her family were ideal neighbors. Kim's idyllic life eventually fell apart. For some reason, something abruptly changed in Kim in 2001, according to her loved ones. I don't know if she just tired of being the one everyone always relied on, her sister Marie said shortly after Kim's death. I don't know if she just got fed up with being supermom or the superwoman of the family. We don't know. I wish I could have had my final words with her. That year, Kim enrolled in a cooking class at the Sheridan Technical Center in Hollywood, Florida. Through the class, she met a habitual drug user named Kenny and began having an affair with him. When Kim's husband, Hugh, learned of the affair, he attacked Kenny with a baseball bat. Kim refused to end the affair with Kenny or give up the cocaine habit she was beginning to develop under his influence. Hugh therefore took the kids and left. He sold the family home and took the children to Ocean City, New Jersey. Kim moved to Atlantic City to be closer to her children, bringing Kenny with her. After Hugh and Kenny got into another altercation, Kim and Hugh's children were placed in foster care. When they first arrived in Atlantic City, Kim and Kenny both found steady employment at a restaurant inside the Taj Mahal casino. However, they quickly fell into the drug scene prevalent throughout Atlantic City. Kim's once social drug habit turned into a full-blown addiction to crack cocaine fueled by her guilt over no longer being with her children. Neither she nor Kenny could hold a job anymore as their drug habit escalated. Kenny began shoplifting, and Kim turned to sex work, selling herself on Pacific Avenue, known locally as the Track, 1 block inland from the boardwalk. On September 9, 2006, Kim's estranged husband, Hugh, arrived in Atlantic City. He had been working construction jobs up and down the East Coast. Kenny was in jail at the time on a shoplifting charge. Hugh told his estranged wife he was there to help her if she wanted to get her life back on track. When Hugh left Atlantic City, Kim went with him and stayed with him for several weeks at a motel in Jericho, New York on Long Island while Hugh was working in the area. The couple did not reconcile, but Hugh still viewed his estranged wife as a friend he wanted to help. After 5 weeks in New York, Kim told Hugh that she had unfinished business she needed to handle back in Atlantic City. She made plans to meet back up with Hugh after a week before leaving for New Jersey, but she never returned. This had not been the first time Hugh had tried to help Kim get her life back on track, but it, unfortunately, would be the last. The last confirmed sightings of Kim alive occurred in the early hours of November 19th, the day before her body was found. She came in to Papa Joe's, a diner on Pacific Avenue, shortly after it opened at 2:30 a.m. According to Joseph Bassino, the owner of the diner who also knew Kim, she ordered her usual breakfast of 2 fried eggs, American cheese and sausage on a Kaiser roll, and a Mountain Dew. After she ate, Kim went outside and got into a black Nissan Maxima. A source who had been a high-ranking member of law enforcement working on the case early on would later tell NJ Advanced Media, speaking under the condition of anonymity, that Kim had been with a client in a room at the Taj Mahal Hotel and Casino. She left the room to go buy drugs around 5 a.m., telling her client that she would come back to the room. She never did. He called her several times, but she never answered. The client, a doctor from North Jersey, was identified using Kim's cell phone records. He was cleared by police because surveillance footage supported his account and showed him at the hotel and in the casino. Post-mortem examination would determine that Kim had died as a result of strangulation with some sort of rope or cord. Because of decomposition, authorities were only able to state more broadly that the second-to-last woman killed had died of asphyxiation, with strangulation being a possibility. She was 23-year-old Tracy Ann Roberts from Bear, Delaware. Tracy had been an active and loving child whose favorite thing to do was spend time with her friends. Her life began to go off track when she was 14, and she began experimenting with drugs and alcohol. She dropped out of high school at 16 and found a job as a telemarketer for a mortgage broker. She began dating one of her coworkers and gave birth to their daughter when she was 18. The baby's father was awarded primary custody of her when she was 5 months old. Tracy began taking steps to improve her life, enrolling in a trade school and training to be a medical assistant. She found a job at a doctor's office, and the Delaware Housing Authority helped her purchase a townhome. Tracy's boyfriend brought their daughter to live with her there. According to Tracy's mother, this was the happiest time of Tracy's life. This happy period soon ended, however, when the doctor's office where Tracy worked moved after she had been there for almost a year, leaving her without a job or any way of making her mortgage payments. Her relationship with her daughter's father ended, and her home went into foreclosure. Tracy began using cocaine with increasing frequency. Tracy spent a few years moving between Delaware, Philadelphia, and South Jersey. She returned to Atlantic City for the last time in August of 2006, trying to escape an abusive relationship. She worked for a time as an exotic dancer until her drug use left her too thin and frail for club owners to want to employ her. She then turned to the streets and to sex work. The once social Tracy became isolated and quiet, according to other sex workers she met during this time. Shortly before her death, Tracy had almost left Atlantic City. On November 8th, A man who had wanted to be her pimp had punched Tracy so forcefully in the neck that she began coughing up blood and had to be taken to a hospital. While she was there, she called her mother, Joyce, to ask her to come pick her up and bring her back to Delaware. Joyce made the 90-minute drive but found when she reached the hospital that she had arrived 5 minutes too late. Tracy had just checked herself out and left with 2 unidentified men. "We are good people who had a daughter who had a disease," Joyce Roberts said during an interview prostitute in Atlantic City. This was somebody's daughter. The cause of death of the other 2 victims could not be determined because of the advanced level of decay in their bodies by the time they were discovered. 42-year-old Barbara Brader, believed to be the second woman and not far from where her body was ultimately found. She was charming and witty and considered to be the smartest of her siblings, who encouraged her to go on the game show Jeopardy because she was always able to quickly shout out the right answers when she watched it because she was knowledgeable about such a broad range of topics. Barbara's life changed dramatically when her father died suddenly. His loss tore her family apart and left Barbara in a deep depression. She studied at a community college before transferring to Penn State but left school after struggling to get through her first year there. She moved to the Jersey Shore for a fresh start and seemed to do well in her new life, holding down a series of steady waitressing jobs. When Barbara's mother opened up the Santa Fe Trading Company, a small chain of stores selling Native American art, jewelry, and clothing, Barbara went to work for her, first working at her shop on the Atlantic City boardwalk and eventually managing the business. However, when Barbara's mother decided to retire and sold the business, Barbara had to go back to waitressing. In 1997, Barbara achieved her lifelong goal of becoming a mother, giving birth to her daughter, Dominique. However, when Dominique was 4, Barbara sent Dominique to live with her sister Valerie in Florida. Dominique's father had Barbara had taken one of his pills to help with severe menstrual cramps. Barbara had taken one of his pills to help with severe menstrual cramps, a small decision which would ultimately have dire and major implications. As the years went on, her own dependency grew, and when the couple was cut off by doctors and could no longer get the prescription medication, they eventually turned to heroin. While it was her escalating drug use that had led to Barbara needing to send her daughter to her sister, her heartbreak at being away from Dominique only encouraged her growing problem. Eventually, Valerie severely limited contact between Dominique and Barbara so as not to upset Dominique, because Barbara would sob uncontrollably at the end of their phone calls and cling to her at the end of their visits. Barbara ultimately agreed to give up custody of her daughter completely because it was what was best for Dominique, and Valerie's adoption of Dominique was finalized within weeks of Barbara's death. Dominique remained in Florida with her aunt, uncle, and 2 cousins. She was put into therapy and became an excellent student with plans to go to college. Barbara's drug use was also a means of self-medicating as she dealt with alleged domestic violence at the hands of Dominique's father. The relationship ended when he was sent to prison on drug possession and burglary charges. Around this time, Barbara started smoking crack and supporting herself through sex work. Barbara was last seen leaving a house she was staying at with a friend in Bettner, New Jersey on October 17th. Her 2 sisters tried to file a missing persons report on her, but say police gave them the runaround after they discovered Barbara had a previous arrest for solicitation. "My sister didn't deserve to die the way she died and then to be thrown like a piece of trash in a muddy ditch. I hope they get the SOB that did this," Barbara's sister Francine said after Barbara's body was found. The 4th body, believed to belong to the first woman killed, was so heavily decomposed that authorities had to rely on releasing descriptions of some of the tattoos still visible on it in order to identify the victim. She may have been killed as early as 6 weeks prior to the discovery of her body. Molly Dilts was just 20 years old at the time of her death. She was from the small mining town of Blacklick, Pennsylvania, where she grew up with not a lot of money, but a lot of love from her family. Molly had been a warm and caring child who struggled as she faced hardships as a young adult. She had trouble coping with the deaths of her mother and her brother when she was a teenager. In response to the losses, she developed a rebellious streak, which led to drinking, drug use, and a few minor run-ins with the law. She was enrolled in the special education program at Blairsville High School but frequently missed school and dropped out during her junior year. The courts sent her to rehab, but she did not remain sober after leaving. In June of 2005, Molly gave birth to her son, Jeremiah. She willingly signed over custody of him to her father. Molly spent the year following Jeremiah's birth, traveling between her hometown in western Pennsylvania and Philadelphia. She first arrived in Atlantic City in the summer of 2006. She came back to visit her family in Pennsylvania at the beginning of October and told them that things were starting to turn around. She still occasionally smoked marijuana but had stopped using any kind of harder drug. Her family last heard from her on October 7th when she called collect from a phone booth in Atlantic City. Problems plagued the investigation into the 4 murders from the very beginning. The water in the drainage ditch contaminated the bodies and washed away potential trace evidence. Police believed that the women had been killed elsewhere and their bodies had just been disposed of in the drainage ditch, leaving them without primary crime scenes to investigate. Furthermore, many of the similarities between the 4 victims had alternative explanations calling into question their significance. 3 out of the 4 victims had previous arrests for solicitation. Molly Dilts had no such arrests and her father was not convinced that she had ever turned to sex work, but other women working in the area reported that she had in the weeks before her death. While this may point to the killer being a client who found his victims by picking them up on the streets, the lives of the 4 women overlapped in other ways as well. They were all known to frequent several of the same motels, restaurants, and soup kitchens, providing a wide variety of overlapping locations in their lives where they also could have crossed paths with the person who killed them. Post-mortem examinations showed that the victims had various kinds of substances in their systems at the times of their deaths. Kim and Tracy had large amounts of cocaine, Molly had a large amount of alcohol, and Barbara had a potentially lethal amount of heroin. Each woman was known to abuse the substance found in her system, so it is unclear if they had acquired the drug on their own or if the killer had provided it to them in an effort to incapacitate them. Defensive wounds could not be found on any of the women's bodies. This is most significant in the case of Kim Raffo, whose body was found relatively quickly, so the lack of discernible defense wounds could not be attributed to advanced decomposition. The heads of all 4 victims were found pointed in the same direction, east. This led to speculation that the killer was making a statement about Atlantic City as it was in that direction. Because the woman had been found barefoot and facing the general direction of Mecca, rumors also circulated that a Muslim had been responsible for the murders, as Muslims say their daily prayers, barefoot and facing Mecca. A Muslim man who was a convicted drug dealer and a friend of Kim Raffo was brought in by police for questioning but could never be tied to the murders. In addition, the positions of the heads could also potentially be alternatively explained by the pull of the current in the water in the ditch as it flowed out to the bay rather than by a deliberate choice made by the killer. The circumstance that appears least likely to have an alternative explanation is the fact that all 4 women were found barefoot, which some investigators believe may indicate that the killer had some sort of foot fetish. Several other sex workers have reported having clients with such an interest around the time of the murders. One of them, a woman named Denise, has come forward reporting a particularly concerning incident. A client of hers had been obsessed with her shoes to the point where she had given him a pair of them to keep. He was talking about some crazy stuff. He was talking about really bizarre stuff, like he's killed some people. She later told 48 Hours, who brought in a sketch artist to develop a sketch with Denise's help. The client later sent Denise a Christmas card in which he referred to himself as the Riverman, feared to be a reference to the Green River Killer who murdered sex workers in Washington state. The man was eventually identified and found to be a drifter. No direct links between him and the murders has been discovered. The Atlantic City Prosecutor's Office, Major Crimes Unit, the Egg Harbor Township Police Department, the Atlantic City Police Department, the FBI, and the New Jersey State Police all worked on the investigation. They conducted interviews and questioned potential suspects, but have never identified a formal suspect in the case. A man who had been staying at the Golden Key Motel was reported to police by his ex-girlfriend after he evicted her from his house following an ongoing domestic dispute, and served time in prison after evidence of an unrelated crime was discovered during a search of his home. But the investigation has never led to any arrests for the murders. A potential major development in the case came 4 years after the 4 bodies were found in December of 2010. 4 bodies belonging to women who had been involved in sex work were discovered wrapped in burlap along a remote stretch of Ocean Parkway near Gilgo Beach on Long Island. The similarities between the New York murders and Atlantic City murders led to speculation that they may have been connected. Authorities in Suffolk County, New York were in contact with the investigators working on the 2006 murders in Atlantic City. Several other bodies of individuals believed to have been killed by the same individual who took the lives of the 4 victims found near Gilgo Beach were found in the following year, but no concrete link to the Atlantic City cases was ever identified. In November 2016, near the 10th anniversary of the discovery of the 4 bodies, acting Atlantic County Prosecutor Diane M. Ruberton declined to say if her office believed the Atlantic City cases were connected to those in Long Island. The week before, however, the Suffolk County Police Department stated that they believed the cases on Long Island and the cases in West Atlantic City were not related. The Golden Key Hotel remained a dangerous place rife with illegal activities in the years after the murders. Along with many of its neighboring flophouses, it was severely damaged during Hurricane Sandy in 2012. Egg Harbor Township purchased several of the damaged motels in November of 2013 and demolished them in 2015 with hopes of redeveloping the area. In a statement released in 2018, Atlanta County Prosecutor Damon G. Tyner refused to describe the still unsolved murders as a cold case because the case is being actively investigated by multiple agencies. In the same statement, Egg Harbor Township Police Chief Raymond Davis said, "As an original supervisory member of the investigative team assigned to this case, I can confirm that these victims are not forgotten. All member agencies involved in this investigation, local, county, state, and federal, remain diligent in our pursuit of the person or persons responsible. We urge anyone with information to contact law enforcement." 15 years after Kim Raffo, Molly Dilts, Barbara Brader, and Tracy Roberts were killed, their killer has still not been identified. Samantha Josephson grew up in Robbinsville, New Jersey. After graduating from high school in 2015, she enrolled at the University of South Carolina. Known for her friendliness, kindness, and love of fun, Samantha was well-liked by everyone she met. Her vibrant personality helped her balance her studies, where she excelled, and her part-time job at the Liberty Tap Room. She also made sure to nurture her relationships with friends and family, who were very important to her. By early 2019, 21-year-old Samantha was gearing up to graduate with a degree in political science. Samantha planned to return to the Northeast, closer to her family, after her graduation in May. She had been accepted to law school at both Rutgers in New Jersey and Drexel University in Philadelphia and planned to attend Drexel, where she had been offered a full scholarship. Her goal was to specialize in international law. Samantha spent the evening of March 28, 2019 out with her friends in Columbia's Five Points district. She became separated from her group of friends, who last saw her shortly after 1 a.m. on March 29th at a bar near the 700 block of Hardin Street. Samantha ordered an Uber to drive her home. She never arrived there. Samantha was scheduled to work later in the morning of 29th, and her boss was surprised when she did not arrive on time. He instead was met with a phone call from one of Samantha's friends who was asking if she had arrived at the restaurant. Samantha's friends and roommates spent the morning going to establishments near where she was last seen, showing her picture and asking to see surveillance footage. When they could not locate her despite hours of searching, they reported her missing to the police at approximately 1:30 in the afternoon. Around 3:30 p.m., just as the missing persons investigation was getting underway, turkey hunters in rural Clarendon County discovered a woman's body along a remote dirt road approximately 65 miles away from where Samantha had last been seen. They called the sheriff's department to report what they had found. Based on the description of the body and the clothes found with it, authorities believed it was Samantha Josephson, a suspicion which was later confirmed. The pathologist who examined Samantha's body would later testify that she had sustained approximately 120 stab wounds and that at some point, he had stopped counting them as there were so many wounds that the exact higher number would not add anything to the report. The injuries were throughout her head, arms, chest, leg, foot, and back. Several of the wounds that had penetrated her brain and neck would have been fatal on their own. Several of her injuries indicated that she had fought back against her killer. The pathologist also testified that it was difficult to obtain a blood sample from the body for routine testing as just over a tablespoon of blood was left in it. More than 100 people attended a vigil held in Samantha's memory on March 31st. More than a dozen people who were important to her, including her father and boyfriend, spoke at the vigil. Samantha's body was returned to her family in New Jersey, and her funeral, attended by nearly 1,000 mourners, was held at Congregation Bethlehem in Princeton Junction on April 3rd. Her body was later interred at Perrineville Jewish Cemetery. Samantha was posthumously awarded her degree in political science by the University of South Carolina in May. The investigation into Samantha's murder was greatly helped by digital records and surveillance footage. A check of Samantha's bank records showed that several unsuccessful attempts to use Samantha's debit card to make withdrawals were made at 2 ATMs in Columbia and Sumter, South Carolina, both along Sumter Highway in the hours after her murder. Surveillance videos showed someone making these attempts, which were unsuccessful because they did not have the correct PIN. However, this person covered their face, so it could not be seen in any of the footage. Surveillance footage from the area where Samantha was last seen was more helpful in developing a theory as to what had happened to her once she was separated from her friends, and provided a major lead. The footage showed Samantha standing outside and ordering an Uber. Eventually, a black Chevrolet Impala pulled up in a parking spot next to her. Samantha got into the back seat of the Impala just after 2 a.m. Authorities believe Samantha thought the car was the Uber she had ordered to drive her home. It was not. Footage also showed the Impala circling the block where Samantha had been waiting on the curb, prior to it pulling up next to her. This means the driver may have seen her as she was waiting. Samantha had initially approached a different vehicle to see if it was her Uber while the Impala had been behind it. After seeing Samantha realize her mistake and go back onto the curb, the Impala's driver pulled into the parking spot next to her and Samantha got into the car. Police, therefore, began looking for the black Impala. Around 3 a.m. on March 30th, just 25 hours after Samantha was seen getting into the Impala, a Columbia police officer observed a vehicle consistent with the one Samantha had been seen getting into, driving just a few blocks away from the 5 Points district. He pulled the car over and the driver was initially cooperative. However, when the officer mentioned that his vehicle matched the description of a suspect vehicle, the driver fled on foot. After a short foot chase, the driver was apprehended. He was 24-year-old Nathaniel David Rowland. Inside Rowland's vehicle, police found a container of bleach, germicidal wipes, and window cleaner. They also found a large amount of blood in Samantha Josephson's cell phone. The child safety locks on the car were activated, meaning the back doors could only be opened from the outside. This led authorities to theorize that the child locks had been used to prevent Samantha from escaping the car when she realized she was not in her Uber. After the blood was found to belong to Samantha, Rowland was formally charged with her kidnapping and murder. Forensic evidence continued to mount against Rowland as the investigation progressed. Samantha's footprint was found on the rear passenger window of his vehicle. Samantha's DNA was found under Rowland's fingernails. Her DNA was also found in numerous locations throughout his Impala, on the heel of his sock and on a bandana confirmed to be his because his own DNA was also present on it. Samantha's blood was on cleaning supplies later found in Rowland's girlfriend's home and on two sections, the serrated blade and the inner handle on a depot-bladed multi-tool found in the trash behind the home. One of Samantha's hairs was also found on the multi-tool. Investigators believed this multi-tool was the murder weapon because it would cause wounds consistent with the parallel wounds found on Samantha's body. Maria Howard, Rowland's girlfriend at the time Samantha was killed and the resident of the home where much of the evidence against Rowland was found, would later testify she had seen Rowland cleaning that multi-tool later in the day of Samantha's murder. Also found in the trash, along with the multi-tool, were bed sheets, towels, cleaning wipes, toilet paper, a jacket, and a pair of pants, all with Samantha's blood on them. When Rowland went to trial for Samantha's murder in July of 2021, his now ex-girlfriend, Maria, testified against him. During her extensive time on the stand, she provided important information about Rowland's actions and locations both before and after the time Samantha had been killed. On March 28, 2019, the evening when Samantha had begun her time in the 5 Points district with her friends, Rowland had come over to Maria's home and was going to spend the night there. They went to bed, but Maria woke up in the middle of the night to find that Rowland was gone. Roland enjoyed going out to the Five Points district and had previously gone out to do so after Maria had fallen asleep, so she was not necessarily alarmed to find that he was gone when she awoke. However, Maria was upset. He left that night because he was supposed to give her a ride to her job at McDonald's in the morning for her 7 a.m. shift, and she hated being late for work. Furthermore, she'd given Roland her shirt from her uniform to wash and dry, and she had left her hat from her uniform under the rear window of his car the day before, so she could not simply call someone else for a ride to get her to work if he did not return in time. Maria could not recall the exact time Roland returned to her home on the morning of March 29, 2019, only that it was after she was supposed to already be at work. Upset that he had made her late, she went out to talk to him and ask for her work shirt. He did not have it, so he left her home and returned with it 10 minutes later. When he gave her the shirt, it was wet, and when she looked for her hat in his car, it was gone. She asked Roland where it was, and he told her it was in the country. She was confused as to why it was out in the country, and when she asked him why it was there, he told her it was because it had blood on it. She asked him why it had blood on it, and he told her to mind her own business. Maria got into the car so Roland could drive her to work, but he had to stop for gas and to buy some items on the way. It was then that Maria noticed there was blood in the back seat. A sheet had been put down over it, but it had not been placed perfectly, so some of the blood was still visible. Maria asked Roland about the blood, and he again told her to mind her own business. Roland dropped Maria off at McDonald's at 7:45, 45 minutes after her shift was supposed to start. Roland was also supposed to come back to pick up Maria at the end of her shift, which she failed to do, so Maria found another ride home. When she arrived back at her house, she was angry, banging on the door, but Roland's reaction was just one of shock at seeing her. Maria went inside to take a shower, and when she was finished, she saw Roland outside cleaning his car. When she went outside, she could smell bleach. Roland obviously did not thoroughly clean the vehicle, as blood would still be visible inside of it. When he was apprehended by police, and texts sent between Maria and Roland that day show them discussing blood that had gotten on Maria's daughter's shoe after she rode in the vehicle later in the day. Maria and Roland drove to her mother's house that day, with Maria driving Roland's car. During the drive, Roland put on blue surgical gloves and began cleaning his multi-tool with wipes. That evening, 2 of Roland's friends came to Maria's home to meet up with him, and they left to go out to the Five Points district for the evening. Maria asked Roland what he was doing going out to such a popular area when he had blood in his car. He told her to mind her own business. After Roland left, Maria was watching the news when a segment about Samantha Josephson was aired, and the surveillance footage of her getting into a black Impala was shown. Maria recognized the car as Roland's, and the events of the day suddenly made sense to her. She did not immediately act on this realization, however. Maria testified that she did not call the police immediately after seeing the blood in Roland's car or seeing the news segment, because she feared for her own life and that of her young daughter should she act out against Roland. He was taken into custody just a few hours after the news segment aired. Roland and Samantha's cell phones were also important pieces of evidence at his trial. GPS data shows Samantha and Roland's cell phones traveling in the same direction until Samantha's phone was turned off and Roland's phone continuing on to the area where Samantha's body was eventually found. Roland was familiar with this area, as it was not far from a home owned by his family where he had recently resided. Samantha's cell phone was not turned on again until later in the morning on March 29th, when it was in downtown Columbia and then traveled to Monticello Road. Surveillance footage shows a man dressed in dark clothes coming into a cell phone store on that road. According to the store's owner, the man, whom he identified as Roland, drove up in a black Impala and wanted to sell a phone. The phone was unlocked, and the owner saw a picture on it of a young woman he would later say appeared to be Samantha Josephson. The man wanted $300 for the phone, but the store only offered him $125, so the man left the store with the phone, which would later be located by police in Roland's vehicle. A list had been found in Roland's car reading duct tape, taper whole body, gloves all black, flip phone, gasoline, matches, with the word matches crossed out. A handwriting expert compared the handwriting on the list to a known handwriting sample from Roland and concluded that Roland had written the list. Roland's fingerprints were also found on the paper the list was written on. Roland's defense team did not call any witnesses. A major aspect of their defense was the fact that while Samantha's had been found in locations and on items tied to Roland and on his body, Roland's DNA had not been found on Samantha's body even though she tried to fight off her killer. Roland had been wearing long sleeves the night of the murder and scratches were found on his jacket. Just prior to resting their case, the defense requested that all of the charges against Roland be thrown out, arguing that the prosecution's case was entirely circumstantial and mainly tied Samantha to Roland's vehicle rather than the man himself. Circuit Judge Clifton Newman rejected the request, stating that the prosecution did present more direct evidence and that the jury should have the opportunity to consider the extensive amount of evidence, both direct and circumstantial, that had been presented. On July 27, 2021, after just an hour of deliberation, a jury found Roland guilty of kidnapping, murder, and possessing a weapon during a violent crime in Samantha's case. After the verdict was read and before the sentencing, Samantha's loved ones were able to address the court about the pain her loss had caused them. Roland's mother also addressed the court, who was interrupted by the judge as she took the opportunity to claim her son was innocent. Judge Newman reminded her that the jury had already found her son guilty and she was not speaking as a witness. If she had any evidence that would have supported her son's innocence, she should have testified to it during a trial. As he stood before Judge Newman for his sentencing, Roland again claimed to be innocent of the crimes he had just been found guilty of. Judge Newman was not as moved by Roland's word as he was by what he described as the avalanche of evidence against him. Roland is currently serving his life sentence at Kirkland Correctional Institution. While the Josephson family was grateful Roland would not have the opportunity to hurt anyone else, his conviction did not remove the pain they had felt since Samantha was murdered. "I will always love you, think about you, worry about you, and I will always hear your voice inside my head saying, 'Dad.'" Seymour Josephson said at his daughter's funeral, "You have so much more to do. You will not be forgotten. You could never be. We will never forget your name. Samantha Josephson. Samantha Josephson." Samantha's name would continue to live on through the advocacy of her family as well as through legislation passed in response to Samantha's parents, Marcy and Seymour Josephson, established the What's My Name Foundation to honor their daughter's memory by providing education about ride-sharing safety. The name of the foundation comes from one of the major safety tips it advocates: passengers asking the driver of a vehicle to tell them the passenger's name before getting into their vehicle to ensure they are, in fact, the ride they ordered. The Josephsons hope this simple action will become as instinctual as putting on a seat belt amongst rideshare passengers. The Josephsons have also called for more accountability in the ride-sharing industry and advocated for the widespread use of already available technology to make ride-sharing more safe by having drivers place barcodes on their windows for passengers to scan to confirm they have found their correct ride before getting into a vehicle. Shortly after Samantha's murder, Uber announced a new initiative to use push notifications to remind users to check the make, model, and license plate of a vehicle, as well as the name and photograph of the driver before getting into a vehicle. The initiative was initially rolled out in Columbia, South Carolina, as part of a larger campus safety initiative in partnership with the University of South Carolina. Lyft also announced plans to conduct checks on their drivers daily, in addition to their already mandated annual background check. Several pieces of legislation named in honor was written shortly after Samantha was killed, and it quickly made its way through the state legislature. It was signed by Governor Henry McMaster on May 16, 2019, and went into effect that June, less than 3 months after Samantha's death. The act makes impersonating a ride-share driver a crime and requires ride-share vehicles to prominently display their license plate number on the front of their vehicle so that passengers do not have to walk behind the vehicle to check the plate number. On June 20, 2019, Governor Phil Murphy of Samantha's home state of New Jersey signed Sammy's Law, named in honor of Samantha. The law requires rideshare services to issue illuminated or reflective signs to their drivers, who must display one sign in their windshield and one in their back window. Vehicles must also have scannable QR or barcodes, as well as placards identifying the vehicle's driver. In October of 2019, Congressman Christopher Smith of New Jersey filed a federal version of Sammy's Law. The law would set up a digital system allowing rideshare passengers to verify a vehicle as their ride before entering it. In addition, it would also establish a 17-member board called Sammy's Council, which would report to the Secretary of Transportation to advance safety standards in the rideshare industry. It would also make it illegal to purchase or sell ride-sharing signage and require reports on the incidents of assaults on rideshare drivers and passengers, and on the background checks that drivers undergo to be generated. The law passed in the House of Representatives in February of 2021, as Samantha's law was refiled in February of 2021. As Samantha's legacy makes an increasing impact on rideshare safety, her family does not want the memory of Samantha herself to be lost amongst all of the work being done in her name. We just want you to know that she is a fabulous young woman. A fabulous young woman, Samantha's mother Marcy said of her in April of 2019. Kind, a best friend to everyone, really determined, a hard worker and a fun young woman. In this case, we head to Las Vegas, Nevada in April 2021. This renowned city, always bustling and lively around the clock, offers an abundance of everything. Among the nearly 500,000 residents is 45-year-old Daniel Hulser. Daniel was previously married to Elizabeth Halgilian, a former Republican member of the Nevada Senate, and they shared 3 children, Dana, Jordan, and Sierra. Daniel of fitness and the outdoors, as well as being creative, earning a bachelor's degree in music and a master's business degree from Corban University in Salem. The family made the move to Nevada when Daniel found work in Las Vegas. And soon after, Elizabeth was elected to the state senate and became the youngest female to be elected to the Nevada legislature as a state senator. 10 years would pass since the couple's wedding in 2001, and the marriage was starting to fall apart. In 2011, Daniel was arrested after Elizabeth alleged that he had tried to force himself on her. Due to Elizabeth's position, the arrest wasn't unknown to the public, and it received a fair amount of media attention. Daniel filed for divorce a month later, amid allegations of Elizabeth having an affair, and he pleaded guilty to misdemeanor counts of coercion and battery and was sentenced to 6 months probation and anger management classes too. After this, almost another decade would go by. Both Daniel and Elizabeth had since remarried. Although Daniel's second marriage would end in divorce as well, he and his second wife would remain close and would continue to use the joint bank account. In 2020, he and Elizabeth would enter into what would become a very contentious and acrimonious battle. With all of this going on in the background, Daniel, as many do, was regularly sharing his life on social media. He showcased a lot of his life to his almost 13,000 Twitter followers, 20,000 Instagram followers, and his many Facebook friends. Sources say that although Daniel was far from perfect, he was working on himself and adored being a father above all else. His family said he was the heart of the Halstead family, and his aunt said his world was all about his children. They were first in his life, always. In June 2020, Daniel's daughter Sierra started dating 18-year-old Aaron Guerrero. They had a fast-moving and intense relationship, and at one point even said they wanted to rob their parents and run away to Los Angeles together. Both sets of parents were immediately disapproving of the relationship anyway, especially after they found out about their runaway plans, and they banned Sierra and Aaron from seeing each other anymore. In the parents' eyes, the young couple's romance had started to fizzle out by December 2020. But Sierra and Aaron were still very much an item and were going to stop at nothing to stay together. They were infuriated at not being able to see each other, and police say this put an unbelievable plot in motion in a bid to remain a couple without interference. In late December 2020, Daniel made a gushing post celebrating Sierra turning 16 years old. After this, several months would go by all accounts with nothing of notes happening. On the April 3rd, Daniel shared another Facebook post of him and Sierra when she younger. 5 days later, everything would change. And in the early morning hours of April 8, 2021, Aaron ran away from his home and went to meet Sierra in secret. Later that day, Daniel's second ex-wife noticed something concerning. $1,300 had suddenly been withdrawn without warning from their joint accounts. With no word from Daniel as to why this would have happened, she sent him a text, but was met with no response. Christine, Daniel's mother, and his ex-wife Elizabeth were also trying to get hold of him. Neither of them were having any luck. Although Daniel had been out of town for several days, He should have been back by now, and there was no reason for him not to be responding. Christine asked a family friend if they could check on her son too, hoping someone else would have more luck than she was. The family friend called Sierra, and Sierra told them that her dad was just in the shower but had broken his phone, which was why he wasn't answering his calls. She promised she would get him to call them back, but that call never came. The same friend followed this up several more times before Sierra started avoiding the calls completely. A panicked Christine sent a message to her granddaughter. Christine wasn't accepting this as an answer and soon contacted Sierra again, this time demanding to know where her father was. Sierra gave the same excuse. He was in the shower. Christine knew something was deeply wrong and threatened to call the police. Sierra subsequently hung up the phone. Shortly after this, surveillance cameras captured Daniel's blue Nissan Altima leaving the area. Christine asked Peggy Newman, Daniel's friend and landlord, if she could visit the house to check in on him. Peggy said she wouldn't be able to get there for a few hours, but she would be happy to make the trip. Scared to enter the house alone, she waited on the driveway for a friend to join her. While this was going on, Christine made the call that every parent dreads. Peggy and her friend discovered the front door was open, Daniel's car was missing, and the house smelled of smoke with a large scorched patch on the living room floor. They tentatively went through every room upstairs but found nothing. Entering the garage, the smell of lighter fluid was strong and thick in the air. On the ground was a sleeping bag, and inside was the badly burned body of Daniel Helser. Police soon pulled up to the home and began to uncover more things that pointed towards a very disturbing series of events. A chainsaw lay on the floor in the living room, and in the kitchen was a saw covered in blood, as well as another handsaw and 2 knives in the sink. They also found receipts from a Home Depot and an ATM. It was quickly noted that an extensive effort to clean up had been made inside the home. The coroner determined that as well as being burned, Daniel had been stabbed 70 times. 42 of those were in his back. One of the stab wounds cut through a major artery in his neck, and both his lungs had been punctured. He sustained wounds to his shoulders, hands, wrists, and fingers, and at least one wound appeared to have been made through the use of a saw. His body was mutilated before being placed inside the sleeping bag and set on fire. He suffered burns to 40% of his body. His daughter Sierra was missing from the house, as was her boyfriend Aaron, an immediate red flag for the family and police. A quick look into the receipts found in the house led authorities to the all-important CCTV footage. The cameras uncovered Aaron at Home Depot buying saws, gloves, and lighter fluid, and a Winco supermarket camera showed Sierra purchasing 2 gallons of bleach and using Daniel's credit card at an ATM. It didn't take long for officers to put everything together, and a warrant was issued for the pair. On April 13th, officers located the pair, seemingly by chance, almost 400 miles away in another state, Salt Lake City, Utah. They had been stopped when they were asked for proof that they had paid their fare for the train. After running a quick background check, police found that the pair were wanted back in Las Vegas. Authorities soon located Daniel's car, which Sierra and Aaron had stolen and fled in, and a blood-stained blanket was found in the boot. A search of Sierra's phone pulled up a disturbing video that the pair had recorded. They appeared to be lying down in a tent. It is unknown whether this video did actually end up on YouTube or any other platforms, but it still added even more evidence against them. They were extradited to Nevada and booked into the Clark County Detention Center. The teens were faced with 9 felony counts each, which included charges of murder, conspiracy, arson, robbery, and fraudulent use of credit and debit cards. They were held without bail. Chief Deputy District Attorney Christopher Hamner said his office were considering seeking the death penalty in Aaron's case. Although Sierra was charged as an adult as well, Nevada law stipulates she could not face the death penalty because she is under 18, making her automatically exempt. On June 15, 2021, Sierra and Aaron attended an arraignment hearing. They both pleaded not guilty. Family Court Judge Charles Hoskin, who had been involved in the long custody battle between Daniel and Elizabeth, made comments before Daniel was killed and said that he foresaw troubled times ahead. He recalled, "I saw a lot of things with Sierra that caused me concern. It indicates to me that something else is going on with her, and I don't know who at this point is to blame for that, but I'm less concerned about placing blame than I am with regard to this child and the child's relationship with a parent. Daniel's landlord, Peggy Newman, later said, "I hope he didn't see his daughter hurting him. I know he loved his 3 children very much." The family issued a statement which read in part, "The total lack of remorse on display in the video is both reprehensible and unforgivable. While we are grateful for the work of the detectives and the district attorney, we are waiting for justice to be served with maximum accountability allowed. We love Dan very much and miss him every moment of the day. This is the only statement we will be making." The judge set the trial for Sierra and Aaron for December 2021. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.